Hello, welcome to the Robin Family Stories Part 14. Are you ready for 2 more adventures today in the Woodlands? Let's go. If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. Woo! If you go down to the woods today, you better go in disguise. For every little robin there was will gather there for certain, because today's the day the robins will have a party. Yes, today, in our second story, the robins are going to have a very special party. But let's first of all do story 1, where we find out what is happening in the Woodlands. Are you ready? It's called Mopping Up. When some kind friends come to the rescue of some unlucky Woodlanders. After all the rain and flooding in the Woodlands, it seemed that everywhere was wet, and not just outside. Old Mrs Woodmouse, whose kitchen, bedroom and cosy parlour had stayed dry and as warm as toast, found when she pattered down to her cellar that it had not. The water had crept in through a tiny gap under the door. It now formed a pool on the stone floor and shimmered in the light of old Mrs Woodmouse's candle. "Oh, bother," she said to herself. "I will have to get that cleaned up. Luckily, it hasn't gone into any of my cupboards, so things could be worse." And with that, she trotted back upstairs to fetch a mop and bucket. Here you go, a bit like mine. I've been mopping my floors today with my mop and bucket. On the other side of the Woodlands, Molly and Morris Mouse were telling their friends, Roly and Rosemary Robin, about the large puddle that they had found in their kitchen. "We had to put Wellingtons on to help Mummy start clearing up," said Morris. "But at least it didn't sneak into the parlour," said Molly. The old well house and tree stump house both stood on higher ground, so they did not get flooded. But as soon as the 2 Mrs Robins heard about their friends' flooding problems, they decided to go and see if there was anything they could do to help. Mrs Rebecca Robin, her apron in her bag, together with some jam tarts she had made that morning, set off to see Mrs Woodmouse. Meanwhile, Mrs Rosabella and the 4 little robins went off. They went off to visit old Mrs Woodmouse. "How kind of you all to come," she squeaked, "but I've mopped everything up. It was only a little pool, you know. But now you're here, you must stay for some tea and nice hot muffins. Yum, yum." At Mrs Mouse's house, she and Mrs Robin had been mopping and polishing until the kitchen looked as good as new. They were quite tired. When they were finished, though, and certainly enjoyed the jam tarts together with a big pot of tea. "What very kind friends I have, to be sure," said Mrs Mouse, and in her own cosy parlour, old Mrs Woodmouse was thinking just the same thing. Well, look what you can find when you go down to the Woodlands, especially after all that rain. But weren't they kind to each other in helping the old Mrs Woodmouse, who needed some help? Are you helpful? There are many people now who need our help, to visit them and support them and help them and encourage them. Well, the next story is also about helping. Are you ready? It's called Bonfire Night Fun. Kind deeds by the young robins are rewarded with a party. Now, Now November is here, remarked Mrs. Rebecca Robin to her friend, old Mrs. Woodmouse, one Saturday morning. It seems that Christmas is just around the corner. I really must order everything for my Christmas puddings and mince pies. Indeed, smiled Mrs. Woodmouse. Now what I have to do is to tidy up my garden so that it can have a nice cosy sleep until the spring. And with that she hurried off. Mrs. Rebecca Robin gazed after her thoughtfully. Then she had an idea and hurried home quickly. About an hour later, old Mrs. Woodmouse heard a knock on her door and found Roly and Rosemary Robin and their cousin Richard on her step. If you please, Mrs. Woodmouse, Roly said, Mummy sent us to help put your garden to bed for the winter. Old Mrs. Woodmouse was delighted. Yeah, for she had begun to find bending rather tiring. And with her guidance, the three little robins were soon hard at work, tidying and trimming. Do you think they wore their Wellington boots while they did that? That's what I had to wear yesterday when I was tidying and trimming in my garden to keep my feet nice and warm and dry. Now, my dear, she said, as she heard the little clock in her parlour strike 11. I think it's time for elevenses. And the three gardeners enjoyed mugs of delicious, piping hot blackberry cordial and some cherry buns. When everything in the garden was quite beautifully tidy, Mr. Robin and Dr. Robbie arrived. My goodness, you have worked well, they said admiringly, and now we've come to collect the rubbish. There was such a big pile of wood, twigs, leaves, and so on that everyone decided a bonfire was the answer. You can turn it into a bonfire party and invite some of your friends, said Mrs. Woodmouse, and so they did. It was a cold evening, and the three little robins and their friends danced around the bonfire. Yeah! Mrs. Woodmouse stayed indoors and enjoyed the blaze from the window as she prepared toasted cheese and apple turnovers. It's enough to make you hungry, isn't it? Did you notice some key words in those stories today? Mop. Mop. Do you have a mop like mine? That's the mop. And Wellingtons. Do you have some Wellingtons? Some Wellington boots to wear when it's wet outside? If you do, you can jump in the puddles if you find a puddle like they found in the house to mop up. If you have your Wellington boots on, you can jump in them. And then cordial was the blackcurrant, cold, juicy drink that old Mrs. Woodmouse made for the children, for the little robins. Well, let's finish today with a song that helps us to think about helping other people, such as we just heard in the story. Are you ready? Off we go. This is the way we mop the floor, mop the floor, mop the floor. This is the way we mop the floor on a cold and wet morning. Can you help mop the floor? Ready? Sing along with me if you can. This is the way we mop the floor, mop the floor, mop the floor. This is the way we mop the floor on a cold and wet morning. Let's go in the garden now. Ready? This is the way we tidy the garden, tidy the garden, tidy the garden. This is the way we tidy the garden on a cold and wet morning. Well, if you've got your Wellington boots on, you can tidy all those leaves up and put them in a big compost heap. That's what I did yesterday in my garden. I tidied all the leaves. This is the way we tidy the leaves, tidy the leaves, tidy the leaves. This is the way we tidy the leaves on a cold and wet morning. Well, I hope you've enjoyed these 2 more Robin family stories, and I do hope you can give me a like if you enjoyed this video and join me next time for the Robin family stories. So that's all from me for now. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.